My name is Mary. I'm 34 years old. It's been 4 years since my divorce. Our two daughters, 7 and 5, adjusted surprisingly well to their dad's new wife, Bianca. I never made it an issue. I always encouraged them to have a relationship with her because, honestly, what mattered most to me was that my girls felt loved and stable. They visit their dad every weekend, and even though co-parenting hasn't been easy, I tried to keep things civil, for their sake. But the problem started when Bianca began pushing to be called Mom. At first, it was subtle. I'd hear from my girls about how Bianca said moms are supposed to make cupcakes for bake sales, or Bianca says moms tuck their kids in at night. I thought maybe she was just trying to fit in, trying to show she cared. But the tone started changing. She wasn't saying moms anymore. She was saying me. Then my daughters told me one night, as I was brushing their hair before bed, that Bianca wanted them to start calling her Mom. I smiled, but my chest felt tight, like someone had poured cement over my heart. I asked as gently as I could, "And what did you say?" My oldest, Emma, looked down and mumbled, "We told her we already have a mom." I pulled her close, kissed the top of her head, and whispered, "That's right, sweetheart, you do. And it's okay to care about her, but you don't need to change who your mom is." She smiled, but I could see the confusion flicker behind her eyes. Kids shouldn't have to navigate loyalty wars between adults. I told myself to stay calm, that this would blow over. But it didn't. A few days later, my ex, Jason, called me. He sounded more annoyed than usual, like he was about to lay down some decree. "Mary," he said, "I need you to stop making the girls uncomfortable about Bianca." I blinked. "Excuse me?" He sighed dramatically, like I was being impossible again. "They told Bianca they can't call her mom because you said not to. That's manipulative, Mary. You're confusing them." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Jason, I didn't tell them that. I told them they already have a mom. That's just the truth." He paused, then said in that low, cutting tone I remembered too well, "Well, Bianca is their mom when they're with us, so from now on, they'll call her Mom. It's for consistency." I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Consistency? You mean control?" He hung up. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone, shaking. Not because of him. I'd dealt with Jason's manipulative streak for years, but because I knew what was coming. He'd start twisting things. He always did. When the weekend left, the girls left as usual. I packed their bags, gave them extra hugs, told them I loved them. They ran to Jason's car, Bianca waving from the passenger seat with that bright Stepford wife smile plastered on her face, the kind of smile that hides 1,000 ugly thoughts. When they came back Sunday evening, something was off. They were quiet, distant. Emma didn't run to me the way she usually did. Little Ava clung to her sister's arm instead of jumping into mine. My heart sunk. I waited until they were settled, then asked, "Did you girls have a good time?" Emma nodded slowly. "Yeah. Daddy took us to the zoo." Ava added, "And Bianca bought us ice cream." "That's nice," I said, forcing a smile. "What flavor?" "Chocolate," Ava whispered, but her voice cracked a little, like she wasn't sure if she should be talking to me about it. That's when I noticed the way they were looking at me, cautious, hesitant, like I might explode if they said the wrong thing. I wanted to cry right there, but I held it in. Something had happened that weekend, something that changed how they saw me. Later that night, after tucking them in, Emma came into my room clutching her stuffed rabbit. She looked terrified. "Mommy," she said softly, "Daddy said we have 2 moms now." I froze. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" He said, "You and Bianca are both our moms. And
We have to call Bianca Mommy B when we're at their house so she doesn't feel sad. Her little voice cracked on the word sad, and it shattered me.
I pulled her onto my lap and hugged her tightly. "Listen to me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You don't have to call anyone mommy except me. It doesn't make you a bad kid to say no, okay?" She nodded, but I could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to please everyone. That's what Jason counted on, that our daughters would be too kind, too gentle to resist his pressure. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my heart burning with anger and helplessness. I didn't want to turn this into a war, but it was becoming one, whether I liked it or not. Over the next few weeks, I noticed more little things. My daughters started saying Mom less and Mary more when talking to me. The first time Emma slipped and called me by my first name, she looked horrified, like she'd accidentally broken something fragile. I told her it was okay, but inside I felt like the ground was giving way under me. Jason was behind this. I knew it, but he was clever. He was always clever, the kind of man who could ruin you while smiling sweetly in public. When we divorced, he'd painted me as emotional, unstable, too controlling. He knew exactly what words to use to make people doubt me. And now, with Bianca by his side, he had an ally, someone who seemed sweet on the surface, but had that same quiet, manipulative poison underneath. One day, Bianca showed up at my door, unannounced. She was holding a pink lunchbox, Ava's, and smiling like she was the perfect co-parent. "Hi, Mary," she chirped. "Ava forgot this last weekend, and I thought I'd drop it off." I forced a polite smile. "Thanks, you could have just sent it with them." "Oh, I know," she said with a little laugh, brushing her perfect blonde hair off her shoulder. "I just wanted to talk woman to woman. I think we need to be on the same page about the girls." Every instinct in me told me this wasn't going to end well. "Okay," I said slowly. "What page is that?" She tilted her head, her smile never wavering. "I just think it would be confusing for them to have to call me Bianca when they're with us. They already spend half their time at our house. It makes sense that they'd see me as another mom figure." I folded my arms. "They already have a mom figure." Her smile faltered for just a second before she recovered. "Of course, I'm not trying to replace you." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because it sure feels like it." She sighed, as if I was being unreasonable. "Mary, you're making this harder than it has to be. I'm just trying to create a healthy environment for everyone." I laughed softly. A healthy environment doesn't start with forcing kids to call someone else mom. Her eyes went cold then. For the first time, I saw the real Bianca. The sweetness dropped, and there it was, entitlement. She leaned forward slightly and said, "You can't control everything, Mary. You had your turn." That line, "you had your turn," echoed in my head long after she left. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the little pink lunchbox she'd dropped off. My hands were trembling. It wasn't just about names anymore. It was about erasure. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just a petty disagreement between exes. Bianca wanted to erase me, and Jason was helping her do it. And if they thought I was going to sit quietly and let them steal my daughter's love, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. After that day, something in me changed. I stopped pretending that co-parenting with Jason and Bianca was about peace or compromise. It wasn't. It was survival. Mine and my daughter's. Every smile Bianca flashed, every polite text from Jason about the schedule, every time they claimed to just want what's best for the girls, I could see the strings they were pulling behind it.
A week later, I got an email from Jason. It wasn't a message, it was a memo. He'd attached some ridiculous co-parenting plan update document, written like a legal notice, saying the girls were to refer to Bianca as Mom or Mommy B during their time with him to avoid confusion. I could feel my blood boil as I read it. Avoid confusion, he said, as if gaslighting our children was some noble act of clarity. I didn't reply right away. I knew if I responded in anger, he'd twist it. He always did. Instead, I took a deep breath, printed the email, and slid it into a folder I kept labeled custody. It wasn't the first piece of evidence I'd saved, but I had a feeling it was going to be one of the most important. The following weekend, I dropped the girls off again, trying to act calm. Jason stood in the driveway with that smug look he gets when he thinks he's winning. Bianca was already waiting by the door, her arm casually draped around Ava's shoulders like she was posing for a family photo. When I bent down to hug the girls goodbye, Emma whispered, "Mom, Daddy says you're mad because Bianca's nicer than you." That hit me like a punch to the chest. I swallowed hard. "Honey, Daddy shouldn't say things like that." She shrugged, confused and small. "He said you get jealous sometimes." Jealous. That word again. The same word he'd used during our marriage whenever I questioned his late nights, his secret texts, his lies. And now, 4 years later, he was teaching our daughters to see me through that same filter. Emotional, dramatic, jealous. I drove home with shaking hands, tears blurring my vision. How do you fight someone who knows all your buttons and is willing to press them through your own children? For a while, I tried to take the high road. I signed the girls up for art classes, took them on weekend trips, filled their world with love and security. But slowly, I started noticing little cracks. Emma stopped showing me her drawings. She'd say, "Bianca said it's not nice to brag." Ava stopped asking me to read bedtime stories because Bianca's voice sounds prettier. Tiny things, but each one felt like a knife twisting deeper. And then came the school incident. One day, I picked the girls up from school and their teacher pulled me aside. She said, "Mary, I wanted to ask about something. The girls' paperwork, it lists Bianca as their mother now. Was that a mistake?" My heart stopped. "Excuse me?" She showed me the file under mother's name. My name was crossed out, replaced with Bianca R. I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. I took the papers from her hands, staring at that name like it was something toxic. "No," I said, my voice shaking. "That's not a mistake. That's fraud." I left that school trembling with rage. Jason had crossed every boundary imaginable. This wasn't about family anymore. This was identity theft, motherhood theft. He and Bianca were rewriting who I was to my own children on paper. That night, I confronted him. I didn't even knock. I strove straight to his house, parked outside, and marched up to the door. He answered with that infuriating, calm expression, the one he used to use when I was upset just to make me feel crazy. "Mary," he said, "it's not a good time." "Oh, it's a perfect time," I snapped. "You changed school records? You replaced my name with hers?" He shrugged. "It's just easier for the staff to know who's who. They spend half their time with us." "That's not your decision to make," I said through gritted teeth. "I am their mother, not her." Bianca appeared behind him holding a dish towel, acting like this was some innocent little misunderstanding. "Mary, calm down," she said softly. "You're overreacting." Overreacting? I took a deep breath, trying not to scream. "You're both out of your minds. If you ever, and I mean ever, change anything official again, I'll make sure neither of you sees them outside visitation." Jason laughed under his breath. "Good luck proving anything, Mary. You're just angry because you're being replaced." Replaced. That word echoed in my head as I drove home. That night, I poured a glass of wine and sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by every piece of paper, every text, every voicemail I'd saved since our divorce. For the first time, I wasn't just a mom trying to protect her kids. I was a woman plotting a war. I wasn't going to yell or beg or fight in court like before. No. I was going to do what Jason and Bianca would never see coming. I was going to let their own lies destroy them. The next morning, I called my lawyer. He was an older man named David, quiet and methodical. When I told him everything, he listened carefully, occasionally jotting notes. "Mary," he said finally, "this is serious. If what you're saying about the records is true, that's tampering. It's illegal." I leaned forward. "Can we prove it?" He nodded slowly. "With documentation and timing, yes, but we'll need to play it smart. Don't let them know you're building a case. Keep collecting. Keep acting calm." That became my new mantra. Act calm, collect, wait. So I did. Every time the girls came home with new stories, I wrote them down in a little blue notebook I kept hidden in my nightstand. I saved every email, every text, every subtle manipulation. I even recorded a few calls where Jason accidentally let his temper show. But the hardest part wasn't the planning. It was pretending everything was fine. I had to smile through birthday parties where Bianca took photos of our kids blowing out candles and captioned them online as "my babies." I had to sit in school meetings while teachers thanked both moms for coming. I had to listen to my daughter's innocent stories about how Mommy B said I was too busy to take care of them full time. Each time, I'd smile, and each time I felt something inside me harden a little more. Then one night, I found the moment that would change everything. Emma had left her tablet on the couch. Normally, I never snooped through their things, but this time I saw a new notification pop up on the screen. It was from a group chat named Family Time Heart. The participants were Jason, Bianca, and both of my daughters. My stomach turned. I opened it. Bianca had sent a message. "Girls, remember, if anyone asks at school who your mommy is, you say it's me. Your other mommy, Mary, just helps out sometimes." Ava had replied with a heart emoji. Emma had written, "Okay, Mommy B, we love you." I don't think I've ever cried like that before. Not out of weakness, but out of pure grief. They were manipulating my baby so gently, so sweetly, that the girls couldn't even see what was happening. That night, I sat there holding that tablet in my lap and made myself a promise. I wasn't going to beg for their respect anymore. I wasn't going to fight for scraps of motherhood while someone else wore my title. No. I was going to burn their perfect little facade to the ground. Legally, completely, and in a way that would make sure they never forgot who their real mother was. And trust me, they wouldn't see it coming. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but in my case, it had to be surgical, precise, patient, and impossible to trace back to the hand that delivered it. I wasn't going to yell in courtrooms or stage public scenes. I had already learned from Jason that drama plays into his hands. He thrives on spectacle. So I built a plan that used what he and Bianca loved most against them: appearances, control, and the illusion of perfection. First, I went quiet. I stopped answering Jason's passive-aggressive texts with long messages. I stopped confronting Bianca when she showed up smiling with cupcakes. Instead, I played the part of the hurt but reasonable mother, the one everyone else saw. I signed permission slips, volunteered for class parties, and said thank you in school corridors while my chest split open with fury. People saw the calm Mary and assumed I was losing. They didn't see the notebook where I'd logged every transgression. They didn't see the folders, emails, screenshots, recorded calls, school forms with forged signatures. I would admit later that it felt like stealing my own life back, one paper at a time. I used David, my lawyer, like a conductor. He said, "We need a pattern,
And so I made one for him. I requested copies of every document the school had updated in the last 2 years. I fished out bank statements, old emails between Jason and the school nurse, and a receipt for a weekend trip Jason claimed the kids took with their father, which of course had included Bianca and a notarized form signed by both mothers. I asked for timestamps. I cross-checked everything. When you're trying to prove manipulation, timing is everything. Who changed what and when? At home, I started to shift the narrative with our daughters gently, carefully. I couldn't force them into a corner or make them choose. Kids resent being put in the middle. They fold like paper. So I asked little and listened much. "What was your favorite part of the zoo?" I'd ask. "Who made you laugh?" I let them talk about their weekends without interrupting. When they did mention Bianca, I'd say, "That's nice she did that. Who asked you what you wanted?" I wanted the girls to know they could always tell me the truth, and that truth wouldn't get punished. I planted seeds of security rather than anger. Part of the revenge had to be my daughter's steady, unshakable love for me, not something manufactured or demanded. But the real work was outside the house. I started with Bianca's online presence. She loved her image, curated brunch photos, matching outfits, captions about stepmom joy. There was a shallow confidence in her Instagram feed, candid snapshots that were anything but candid. It struck me how much of her identity lived in other people's likes. So I needed evidence that contradicted the lie, little things that would make her smile crack. I hired a private investigator. There, I said it out loud, and even saying it felt transgressive. It wasn't because I wanted to spy for petty reasons, it was because sometimes people lie not with words but with omissions. Bianca painted herself as a flawless caregiver, gentle, patient, always present. But the investigator found things my girls and I had suspected. Patterns of inconsistency, small scams, like a paid-for charity feed of motherhood tips that she'd reposted as her own, a local nanny agency listing that matched Bianca's schedule and contradicted her story of being home all weekend. None of it was criminal on its own, but woven together, it formed a mosaic of performance. If the goal was to prove her narrative was manufactured, this was the thread. While the investigator worked, I used public records. There's dignity in dry paperwork, tax records, property ownership, even the tiny details of who paid for what on a joint credit card. Jason loved to tout their perfect life on Facebook, family dinners, planned trips, smiling children, while quietly keeping money in offshore accounts for investments. I matched receipts to dates and found small, telling discrepancies. He claimed to have taken the girls to a family weekend that corresponded to a day I could prove he was in a business meeting across town via a LinkedIn Live he'd forgotten was public. Sloppy. He'd always been sloppy when he assumed nobody was watching. One of the cruelest, most beautiful parts of the plan was simple: patience. I watched and waited for them to make mistakes. People in fake lives trip over their own lies. Jason and Bianca were no different. They craved validation. They wanted the community to believe that they'd made the girls' lives brighter. So I let them make a show of it. A Thanksgiving came. 2 houses, 2 dinners, 2 sets of photos. Bianca posted a picture of the kids in matching sweaters, arms around her, captioned, "Grateful for my little family." The image was glossy, the kind that gets reshared. But when I requested the original file from the school's holiday party, under legitimate pretenses, I was on the PTA, I noticed the metadata. The photo had been taken at a different time than the caption suggested, and in the background of the original was a small sign from a photo booth company, not from their home, but from a public event. Bianca had edited the background, moving the girls closer and cropping out other adults. I had proof she'd staged intimacy. What would you have done if you saw the woman everyone adored pretending to be the center of your children's universe? I thought about that question in the quiet hours. Would you rage, or would you collect receipts like a demon patient and wait for the day the world could no longer ignore the truth? I chose the latter. Revenge didn't need dramatic outbursts, it needed to be undeniable. One of the first small victories came from a place Jason never expected: his pride. He was one of those men who loved being admired publicly but couldn't handle scrutiny. I started being unobtrusively visible in the places that mattered to him: school board meetings, neighborhood events, the charity run he sponsored. Not with signs or confrontations, but with quiet competence. I volunteered, organized, and made sure my name was associated with outcomes. When the school newsletter praised the volunteer moms for a fundraiser, my name was right there, attached to tangible results. People began to recognize me as the mother who showed up. The narrative slowly shifted. You can't fake reliability forever. Then came the trap that made them show their true colors. I planted it like a seed and watched it bloom. Knowing Bianca's vanity and desire for control, I crafted an email thread that looked like a brainstorming session for a family image project. I copied it to myself and made sure it landed in the right place, in front of a couple of school staff members and a neighborhood blogger who liked good feel stories. The thread included suggestions for rebranding their family image, coordinated outfits, weekend rituals, and, crucially, language to be used when answering questions about the girl's parentage. It was manipulative on the face of it, but it was the sort of manipulation Bianca would normally do privately. She took the bait. Within days, I started seeing pieces of that suggested language echoed in her posts and in things Jason said at PTA. They'd externalized their private plan in public, thinking it was clever. When people began to notice, teachers, other parents, that something about Bianca's script felt rehearsed, they became quietly wary. A neighbor stopped me at the grocery store and said, "Those kids always seem so polished when they come home. It's like a production." I didn't need to say anything. The seed had been planted. Once people's instinct switches from adoration to curiosity, it's hard to get back to that uncritical worship. There were close calls. Twice, I nearly lost everything. Once, Bianca noticed a document missing from her desk at the PTA, a flyer I'd created for a bake sale. She accused me in a group chat of snooping, trying to stir drama. I didn't respond publicly. Instead, I emailed the organizer privately with a calm subject line: confirmation of flyer drafts. The organizer replied, attaching timestamps that proved the version Bianca claimed as hers had been shared after mine. The accusation fizzled. The more they lashed out, the more obvious their insecurity became. Another time, Jason tried to ambush me in front of the kids, asking why I'd contacted the school about the metadata on a photo. He wanted a scene, wanted to rile the children. I kept my voice even and said, "I'm trying to ensure everything is accurate for their records." He stormed off, reddened, and later texted me calling me obsessive. I saved that text for the file. Obsessive, jealous, controlling, labels he'd used before were now the very proof that he was trying to manipulate perception again. As Block 3 closes, the pieces were finally aligning. The community's whispers were shifting. The school had begun a quiet review process after a staff member noticed the altered registration forms. Bianca's curated perfection had small, visible cracks. Jason's confidence, which had always been performative, started to falter in public. My daughters began to relax around me in private, the way children do when they sense a bedrock beneath them. They still loved Bianca in their childish way, but their allegiance to me felt more natural, less pressured. I won't pretend I was proud of how cold and methodical I had become. Revenge had altered me. But I also knew this: the fight was no longer just about a name. It was about truth, dignity, and making sure my daughters would grow up with the honest knowledge of who had been there for them through everything. Next, I had to turn the truth into proof that could not be denied. And that would be the beginning of the end for the life Jason and Bianca had built on a foundation of fiction. They always say the truth will set you free, but in my case, the truth had to be dressed up, notarized, and delivered with a degree of theatrical timing that would make a courtroom jealous. Block 4 was where patience stopped being passive and became action. I had evidence, allies, and an attorney who finally stopped speaking in hypotheticals. It was time to turn the quiet unraveling into a visible collapse. I began by consolidating everything into one ironclad file, a dossier that made a sloppy liar look like a caricature. There were screenshots from the group chat, printed emails where Bianca advised the girls how to answer questions, timestamps showing the school record changes, copies of the altered photos and their metadata, receipts that contradicted Jason's stories, and the private investigator's notes about Bianca's inconsistent schedules. I even had a trail showing who had access to the school's online portal and when. The pattern wasn't just suspicious anymore. It was deliberate. David and I planned 2 simultaneous moves, one public, one private. Publicly, we would present the evidence to the school board and the registrar to force a formal correction of the records and an acknowledgement of tampering. Privately, we would file a motion to amend custody terms on the basis of parental alienation and record falsification. It felt strange to wield the legal system like a scalpel after years of being on the back foot, but it was time. This was not revenge in the playground sense. This was legal, surgical, and relentless. The morning we submitted the complaint, I woke up before the girls and made coffee with hands that trembled. I dressed carefully the way I always had when I wanted to be taken seriously. No drama, no flashy jewelry, just calm competence. I kissed the girls, left a note in Emma's lunchbox about a new book we could read together that night, and drove to the school with the dossier wrapped in a manila folder.
The registrar's office smelled faintly of disinfectant and paperwork. When I handed over the files, the woman behind the counter opened them, her brow knitting. "This is quite extensive," she said. "We'll need to investigate." She didn't say it in a way that suggested it would be dismissed. She said it as if the weight of the files mattered. That afternoon, I sat in David's office while he drafted the motion. "We're going to need witnesses," he said. "Teachers, staff, anyone who noticed discrepancies." I told him about the PTA volunteer, about the neighbor who'd commented on the polished presentations, about the teacher who noticed the changed records. He nodded and began making calls. Watching him work was oddly cathartic, a precise counter to the chaos Jason had always relied on. Of course, the moment they saw the first ripple, Jason and Bianca tried to stem it. Bianca called me one evening, her voice sharp and full of curated concern. "Mary, people are talking. Please don't drag my name through the mud." She sounded practiced, like she'd copied a script from a PR manual. I answered calmly, which was half the point. "Bianca, I just want the truth to be known so my girls aren't confused. If you were honest, none of this would be necessary." "You don't get to use our kids to get back at us," she hissed. I didn't rise to it. "I'm using the truth to protect them. That's different." I hung up before she could invent another insult. They reacted in predictable ways. Lies, blame, performative sadness, and attempts at gaslighting. Jason began sending long, tearful texts about how hard co-parenting was and how unfair it was that I dragged them into this. I kept those texts. David told me to avoid social media and public theaters. He said, "Let them make mistakes. They will." And make mistakes they did. A staff member at the school, uncomfortable with the irregularities, confessed privately to David that they'd felt pressured by Bianca to mark attendance in certain ways. A PTA member who'd been friendly with Bianca admitted she'd noticed Bianca editing family photos to remove other adults. A neighbor volunteered a witness statement about hearing Bianca coaching the kids on what to say when visitors asked about their family.
When the school launched its internal inquiry, Jason and Bianca pivoted to fury. Bianca posted a carefully worded message online about unnecessary accusations against a woman who was only trying to be loving. The comment thread split down the middle, and for the first time since this began, I saw people hesitate. Mothers I'd known for years stopped liking her posts. Comments that once praised her warmth turned into questions about inconsistency. The curated image she'd relied on started to look like a costume. One of the most satisfying blows was small and almost petty, but petty had a way of piling up. Bianca had been using a particular boutique's custom-printed family stationery, the kind with scripted mom in the corner, and paraded about with it on social media. I noticed that the boutique's email receipts were sent to an account linked to Bianca's maiden name and an address that matched a P.O. box she had listed as her home office. My investigator dug deeper. That P.O. box was used by a social media company she freelanced for, not a homemaker living full-time with 2 children. The boutique removed the rave review Bianca had left within 48 hours, and a small but loud online thread began discussing authenticity and influencer parenting. Bianca reacted angrily and privately messaged several women who commented, accusing them of jealousy. Those messages leaked. Suddenly, the woman who had once lectured me about doing too much was being called out for performance. At home, I felt the pressure ease. Emma began to draw pictures of our family with a clear label, Mom plus Emma plus Ava, not Other Mom or Mommy B. She left the picture on the fridge like a small public act. Ava, who had been clingy and cautious, started to ask me to sit next to me during story time again. Those moments, tiny and domestic, felt like trophies I'd kept in a secret case. My revenge wasn't about humiliating them in public for the joy of it. It was about reclaiming the small rituals that make a life real. But the fight wasn't without collateral emotion. There were nights when I put my head in my hands and whispered apologies to empty rooms for dragging my children into the mess. I worried about what this would do to them later, about the sting of hearing their father speak ill of me. I worried if I was hardening them or building resentments. The revenge had to be measured, precise. It was a hard balance, to be fierce and yet tender, to be strategic and yet vulnerable. I failed at it sometimes. I yelled once at Jason over a text and felt sick afterward. But then Emma would bring me a drawing and say, "I love you, Mommy," and the world would right itself. Then came the moment that would break them more publicly than anything else. A school meeting where I was invited, under the registrar's request, to speak about the records. It felt surreal walking into the conference room with David on my side and the dossier under my arm. The room smelled like coffee and nervous paper. Jason arrived late, his face flushed, Bianca trailing, lips pursed. They looked like a couple about to be put on display at a talent show they had no idea how to perform in.
I presented the evidence calmly. I spoke of metadata and timestamps, of edited photos and contradictory receipts. I read aloud a portion of the group chat where Bianca instructed the girls on what to say. I watched as the faces in the room changed. Surprise, discomfort, a dawning recognition that someone had been lying. When the registrar apologized and promised to restore records and notify the proper authorities, Jason tried to interrupt. "This is ridiculous," he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. People were looking at him differently now. The registrar asked questions. The PTA volunteer corroborated certain inconsistencies. Bianca's shoulders tightened. She looked small for the first time I'd seen her. No curated smile, just panic. As we left the meeting, a few parents whispered in the hallway. One woman, a mom I had exchanged holiday cookies with for years, stopped me. "Mary," she whispered, "I'm so sorry. I had no idea." She hugged me like an ally, not like a woman who had once admired Bianca. The shift felt like oxygen after months of suffocation.
Of course, the legal battle was far from over. Jason called his lawyer and filed counterclaims, claiming defamation and harassment. He texted me threats cloaked as paternal concern for the children's emotional state. I saved everything. David reminded me that in court, evidence matters more than righteous fury. He began preparing depositions, lighting up witnesses. The motion to amend custody terms would be brutal and public. We were no longer two people arguing over a title. This was a full legal confrontation over the integrity of parental roles. There were angry nights when Bianca tried to slide into a martyr role on social media. But now those posts got pushback. Friends who had once lined up on her side sent me private messages of support, apologizing for not seeing the signs sooner. It was vindication, but it came with its own sourness. The realization that people had been too eager to project a fantasy onto someone without checking the facts. By the end of Block 4, the house felt steadier. My daughters slept with less anxiety. Emma hugged me in the morning without glancing over her shoulder. The community that had once admired Bianca was now more guarded, and the veneer she had polished for months had chips in it. Jason's swagger had cracks. He still had resources, attorneys, and the capacity to complicate our lives, but the scales were no longer tipped so far in his favor. As I tucked the girls in that night, Emma whispered, "Mom, are you okay?" I smiled and kissed her forehead. "I am now," I said, and meant it. But the worst was coming for them. Evidence is a cold thing until it's presented in a way that others understand. And we had more than enough. Block 5 would be the culmination, the legal hammer, the exposure that would strip their illusion away completely, and the quiet aftermath where I would have to decide what kind of mother and woman I wanted to be once the dust settled. There's a strange calm that comes before the final blow. Not peace, not relief, but a kind of numb awareness that something irreversible is about to happen. That was me, the morning of the custody hearing. The drive to the courthouse felt like floating through fog. The hum of the car engine almost hypnotic. The girls were at my sister's house, safe, oblivious to what this day meant. 4 years of quiet endurance, 2 months of collecting evidence, 3 sleepless nights, and it all came down to this. Jason and Bianca arrived together, perfectly composed, dressed like a magazine spread for modern co-parenting. She wore an ivory blouse, a pearl necklace, the same one she'd worn in the photos where she pretended to be their mother. And Jason had that same fake calm he always used before a fight. They looked like they had rehearsed their expressions in the mirror. The confident smiles, the slight air of a wounded dignity. My attorney David greeted me quietly. He said, "Stay calm. We don't need theatrics. We have facts. That's all." But the truth is, revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the sound of paper sliding across a desk, of a judge reading words that dismantle lies. When the hearing began, Jason's lawyer tried the emotional route. He painted a picture of a bitter ex-wife, unable to let go, obsessed with punishing a happy family. Bianca dabbed her eyes at exactly the right moment, playing the victim with nauseating precision. It was almost admirable. Almost. Then David stood. His voice was steady, his delivery surgical. He laid out the evidence like a map, each point leading neatly to the next. "Your Honor, this is not a custody dispute born of resentment. This is a deliberate, systematic effort to erase the identity of a mother from her children's lives." He handed over the dossier I'd built, the same one that had kept me awake so many nights. The judge flipped through it. The screenshots of the group chat where Bianca coached the girls to call her mom, the altered school records, the forged contact forms, the emails to the principal written from Bianca's account pretending to be me, and even the photo metadata proving image manipulation. The room grew silent, except for the faint rustle of pages. Jason shifted in a seat, his confidence slipping as the judge's brow furrowed.
Bianca's hand moved to his arm, but he jerked it away. For the first time, the perfect couple cracked in front of witnesses. Then came the witness statements. The PTA volunteer described Bianca's insistence on being listed as mother during school events. The teacher recounted confusion when paperwork listed two mothers, both claiming legal custody. The registrar testified that she'd received multiple complaints from Bianca that Mary wasn't involved enough, despite records showing I attended nearly every meeting. Every lie unraveled under the weight of calm, verified truth. Then David called me to speak. I stood, hands trembling, but my voice was clear. I've never tried to take my daughters from their father. I've encouraged their relationship with him and even accepted Bianca's role in their lives. But what I can't accept, what no mother should, is being replaced in name, in memory, in presence. My daughters deserve to know who their real mother is, not live in a story someone else scripted for them. The courtroom stayed quiet. Even the judge's pen stopped moving. When Bianca was to testify, her tone shifted from sorrow to defensiveness to fury. I only wanted the girls to feel loved, she insisted. They called me Mom because they wanted to. Did they? David asked, holding up a printed text. Because here you told them, quote, "Your daddy wants you to call me Mom from now on, or you'll hurt my feelings." She froze. You could almost hear the oxygen leave her lungs. The judge's expression hardened. Jason's lawyer whispered something to him, but Jason stared straight ahead, jaw tight. The final blow came from the private investigator's report. A record of Bianca contacting the school under my name and an audio clip of her bragging to a friend about how easy it was to get the school to change things if you act like you belong. That was the nail in the coffin. By the time the judge spoke, Bianca's face was pale. Jason looked 10 years older. The court finds substantial evidence of misrepresentation and attempted parental alienation, the judge said. Custody will be reviewed and adjusted accordingly. The mother, Mrs. Reynolds, will retain primary custody. All communication regarding the children will go through a monitored parenting platform. Mrs. Bianca Reynolds is prohibited from contacting school authorities without written consent. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I just breathed. 4 years of being polite, reasonable, forgiving, and it all culminated in one paragraph of official language that validated everything I had fought for. As we walked out of the courtroom, Bianca brushed past me, muttering, "You think you won? You ruined your own daughters by dragging this out." I stopped and looked her dead in the eye. "No," I said softly. "I just reminded them who their real mother is." Jason didn't meet my gaze. He walked alone. For someone who always loved control, losing it must have felt like drowning. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was brutal for them. Word spread fast. The PTA, the school, their friend circle. Bianca's perfect image shattered. She deleted her social media accounts after the screenshots began circulating. The doctored photos, the fake captions. The boutique she'd worked with dropped her as a brand ambassador. Jason's employer, who'd seen him as a model of stability, called him in for a conversation. People whispered in grocery store aisles now. Not about me, but about them. The girls adjusted slowly. Emma stopped asking confusing questions about two moms. Ava, shy as she was, started giggling again when we cooked together. They began drawing pictures of us, just us, without anyone else looming in the background. Every time I saw those drawings taped to the fridge, I felt a quiet vindication that no courtroom could replicate. But revenge, no matter how justified, leaves echoes.
There were nights I still replayed everything, wondering if I'd gone too far, if I'd hardened my heart too much. Then I'd remember the fear in my daughter's eyes when they'd asked, "Mommy, who am I supposed to listen to?" And I'd know I did what I had to do. Weeks later, I got an email from the school counselor. She thanked me for setting a precedent. and said the district was revising its parent verification policies because of my case. I didn't expect that kind of ripple effect, but it meant something, that my pain had turned into protection for others. Jason and Bianca eventually separated. Maybe the pressure cracked them, or maybe they'd only been united by a shared need to win. Either way, it was over. One Sunday afternoon, Jason came to pick up the girls. He was quieter, softer, almost human again. "Mary, I messed up." I didn't gloat. I just nodded. "Take care of yourself, Jason." He left, and as the girls ran to the car, Emma turned back and said, "Mommy, I love you more than anything." That was the real ending. Not the courtroom, not the gossip, not the downfall, but that sentence. Because all the revenge in the world means nothing compared to a child knowing where they belong. Later that night, I stood by the window, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I thought about Bianca's face in court, about the lies she'd built like glass towers, and how easily they'd shattered. I wasn't proud of every move I made, but I was proud of surviving, of not letting anyone rewrite my motherhood. If you've ever been in my shoes, if someone's ever tried to take your place, tell me honestly, would you have stayed quiet? Or would you have fought like I did? Because sometimes revenge isn't about destruction. It's about restoration, about getting back the parts of yourself someone tried to steal and realizing you never lost them in the first place.